Can we build an Oldhim Commoner deck with the same power and consistency as our Levia deck? Let's find out. Hi friends, welcome back to Nearly Sane Games. I'm Neil, and today we're going to take a look at my Oldhim Commoner deck that is built in the same vein as our Levia Commoner deck. We'll take a look at the differences and what makes Oldhim better versus Levia. The first thing that's important to note is that Oldhim's ability is actually relevant. We're the essence of Earth and Ice, which we'll probably use. And once per turn, defense reaction, pay 3. If an Earth card is pitched this way, prevent the next 2 damage that would be dealt to Oldhim this turn. That's important. We can prevent damage and still recycle cards, which is helpful. If an ice card is pitched this way, the attacking hero puts a card from their hand on top of their deck. This is a nice disruption tool for decks that like to go wide. I don't know how often we're going to be using this, but it's something, and it's something that Levia doesn't have. Next, we're going to look at the weapons. We were using Romping Club with Levia, which is a 4 attack for 2. And we're going to be using a Nothos with Oldhim, which is a 4 attack for 3. Now the cost is something, but it's not really going to make that much difference because we're going to be running a lot of blues. So the important thing is here, this has a better upside to give our attack +2. So if we end up pummeling this with, say, a red pummel, we can add 4 to it, and with the Romping Club, that would be an 8 power attack. With Anothos, we could activate this ability and give it an additional +2 and make this a 10 power attack. I don't know how often that's going to come up, probably not that much, but it's definitely something. All right, now we have our class-specific equipment. Much like Levia's equipment, we have a Battle-Worn 1. I do like Helm of Isen's Peak ability better. Each turn or each game we should be able to use that, gain an additional intellect, and draw an additional card at the end of our turn. We're still Battle-Worn, so that works just the same for us. In the opposite end of the world, we had an Iron Rot Helm for Levia or an Iron Rot Legs for Oldhim. These are a 1 block for a ninja attack. Important to have extra block where we can. So for the chest piece, for Levia, we're either using Barkbone Strapping or Heart and Cross Strap. Barkbone Strapping if we need a block, and honestly, I really like the Barkbone Strapping in most situations. The Cross Wrap gives us an extra 2 resources to play with, and a lot of times that is relevant, especially if we can also have a blue available, then we have potentially pummel resources available to us. For Oldhim, we're going to use Deep Blue. This will allow us to exchange a card and make it a blue card, which should hopefully get us out of some bad hands and allow us to do something when maybe we shouldn't be able to. We also have a replacement for the ninja matchups where we can have an extra block. Deep Blue doesn't block. It's not my favorite, but it's an extra block for us. Still running Goliath Gauntlet. An extra +2 is excellent. And now we have some differences. For Levia, we're running Hope Merchant's Hood, potentially get us out of bad hands. We have Helm of Isen's Peak for Oldhim, so we're not generally going to swap that out. So instead we have an Iron Rod Gauntlet for an extra block if we need it against Ninja. And then we're running full set of Null Rune because why not? If you run into a wizard match, you're really going to want to have Null Rune available to it. We also have potential for a Frostbite token, which could be fun. All right, so here is one of the places where Levia has an advantage. The red Deadwood Rumbler is an attack for 8 for 3, and we don't have the equivalent in Oldhim. This is really good because it doesn't require us to have an extra card, because we draw and then discard. It does burn a card. The big disadvantage here is that this has no block. If we need the block, sometimes that's relevant. In place of that, we're going to use Snow Under. The Ice Fusion, as we're going to see, we don't have a whole lot of ice to fuse this, but a potential on-hit effect would be kind of nice. And this one does block for 3, also a 3 cost. So we're losing 1 power for that attack, but we're going to see that doesn't matter that much. The next up is we have, for Levia, we have a Wrecker Romp. Now this requires us to have 3 cards in hand because we need to discard a card. This only costs 2, and we'll see in our Oldhim deck that we don't have 2 cost attacks. It does still block for 3, but this is a 3-card hand card. So we're going to replace it with another 3-card hand card. This has better upside, an attack for 10. There is potential that we have Ice Fusion, and if we do that, we get Dominate. It's not going to be very likely. That's a pretty sculpted 4-card hand, but that is a lot of power. And it still blocks for 3. We can throw this away in a block if we need to. The 6 cost is really high. So we need exactly the right hand to play this. We do run a lot of blues, so there's a pretty good chance of that. But it's something to consider. You don't want to arsenal this card. It can get stuck in your arsenal when you can use it for another slot. Don't be afraid to block with this. But if we do have the chance, if it's an opportunity, we can swing for 10, which is a very good attack. Next up, we have our generic pay 3, attack for 7. 7 is going to be the number that we're going to use a lot here. This also blocks for 3. We could have technically used Raging Onslaught in this Oldhim deck, but we're going with Autumn's Touch. The Earth is relevant. We can pitch it to Oldhim's ability if necessary. It's just an extra something. Now here's where things start to get interesting. We have looked at advantage for Levia. Now we're going to start to look at advantages for Oldhim. We have our 7 attack with 3 block. And the interesting thing here is that this has a fusion ability. It's not the best ability, but there is a chance that we could use the fusion. And if we can do that, that is an on-hit effect that we didn't have with Levia. It's not the best on-hit effect, but anything that we have is, I'm going to put as an advantage for Oldhim. Next up, we have Smash Instinct versus Cartilage Crush. Again, a 3 attack, again a 3 block, and a 7 attack for 3. In this, we have Intimidate, which is a very strong effect. I really like the effect. For Guardian, we have a Crush effect. And this isn't going to be the best effect. It's a little bit of a tax effect, but in general, people should be able to block more than that. It is an advantage to have an on-hit effect, and that may change people's blocking. So rather than potentially taking this hit and swinging back with a big swing, they might want to double block this or try to do something else. It can change their plan, which is what we want to do in most cases. Next up, we have another Crush effect. And this is, again, a 7 attack for 3. This one also blocks for 3. So we have much more advantage with Crush Confidence. Again, the hero ability may not be necessarily relevant in all matches. The opponent might not care, but having an on-hit ability, I would say, in general, is even a weak on-hit ability is better than not having on-hit ability. Like, we banish this, but that doesn't do anything for us. So I think that this is an upgrade over our Lunartide Plunderer. Next up, we have another 7 attack Again, this one blocks for 3, whereas our Deadwood Rumbler does not block. We still have the same 3 cost, and again, we have an on-hit effect that isn't necessarily the best, but again, a non-hit effect, if we crush with 4 or more damage, makes people change their mind on what they want to do. And that's what we wanted. That's our goal, is to cause problems for our opponent. Next up, we have our same defensive abilities. 2 Sink Belows and a Fate Foreseen, an Unmovable. Then we run the full set of pummels, red pummels, yellow pummels, blue pummels, all the pummels. This gives us 4 card attacks. We're running Lead the Charge. Lead the Charge gives us an ability to gain another action point. It's a blue, so we have a blue pitch. It only blocks for 2, but there is a potential that we can do an attack, do a Lead the Charge, do one of our big attacks, and then follow up with an Anothos hit. And with Anothos, it could be a 6 power attack. These only block for 2, but I think that the potential upside here is really good. And in a 5 card hand, we can potentially do a double attack. Now, the advantage in Oldhim is that we don't have the random discard effects. We did have Wrecker Romp and Deadwood Rumbler that could potentially alter our hands and make Lead the Charge a much more risky move in our Levia deck. But I think it's more stable in our Oldhim deck. Now we get to our blues, which are our fuel for our big attacks. And Brute has Wrecker Romp. And Wrecker Romp is one of the best blues. It's only a 2 cost. We discard a random card, but it's a 6 power attack. It blocks for 3. It's an amazing card. In the place we have Crush the Weak. It's only a 5 power attack. But in general, we don't want to use these as attacks. We want to use them as either blocks or fuel for our big attacks. Next, we have, again, Raging Onslaught versus Autumn's Touch. Autumn's Touch, we can potentially pitch for Oldhim's ability, prevent the next 2 damage. But otherwise, these are pretty much vanilla and the same cards. Again, we have Riled Up, which we were generally never going to get the effect on, versus Entangle, which we have potential to get the effect on. Again, these are blues. These are mostly fuel. Again, Smash Instinct, probably the better card. Having Intimidate is a pretty cool effect versus our Cartilage Crush, but at least we do still have some on-hit effect. These are kind of comparable. And next up, we continue with the power of Guardian. Crush Confidence is still a pretty decent card. Primeval Bellow can work. It can work with the club, but you do need to have 3 cards, and it needs to work out just right. So I think I'd rather have the stability of Crush Confidence over the Primeval Bellow. All right, so next up we've made a choice that we are going to add some ice cards into our Oldhim build. This gives us the potential to potentially fuse some of either our Glacial Footsteps or our Snow Under. These are generally weaker cards. I'm still looking for that 3 block. It's only a 2 cost attack, but the attack is only 4, so that's not great. But we have this in here for pitch, for block, and for potentially fusing. Don't ever arsenal this card. You don't want it in your arsenal. Same thing kind of worked for Awakening Bellow. Rarely would we have the resources and everything that we need to use this card, but potential upside of having Intimidate on top of one of our Smash Instincts and having that double Intimidate is generally really good. But this card doesn't get played very often. I expect the same thing with Winter's Grasp. In a desperate need, we might play it, but generally we don't want to. And finally, we have the difference here at the end. We had an additional lead the charge in Levia. Again, this does the same kind of thing. It's only a block 2, but potentially the upside is that we can get those big powerhouse 4-card hands. Winter's Bite is a very different card. It only costs 0, so there's a good chance that we could play this. It can strip a card from our opponent's hand, which is very nice. And it is ice, so that we can potentially fuse some of our cards. We only have 2 ice cards, or 4 total, I guess, in our deck to fuse those, so it's not that often that we're going to be able to fuse, and generally we don't keep those cards anyway. But this can work out pretty well. This can also be used for Oldhim's ability. We can pitch this, have them put a card from their hand on top of their deck, and then use it again in the later game as just a make them discard. This was really throwing people off their game, and that's what we like to do, and potentially using it as a fuse. So that's our deck. I think that they're very similar. I think that Levia has a couple of upsides with some of their attacks. I think that her equipment's a little bit better, but I think overall Oldhim is going to have the advantage. The crush on hit effects create different opportunities, different things that it can change the way people blocked over just a vanilla attack. I think that the Anothos has great potential to do more damage. It can do more on a pummel. Again, we can pitch a blue card that has cost 3 or greater to attack with Anothos, and then also pitch another card with cost 3 or greater to trigger the second ability of Anothos. And that wouldn't be too unusual. We do have some lesser cards, but we do have a good amount of cards in blue that will cost 3 or greater. And potentially getting that additional plus upside, I think, will make that, in general, better than Romping Club. I have yet to discard a card and be able to play Romping Club to get the +1 effect. And I also think Oldhim's ability, having a relevant ability on the character, can make for some interesting decisions and potentially some better opportunities than what Levia had. So that's the deck. We'll be playing it in this week's Armory event. Let me know what you think, and leave your comments below. We'll talk to you next time.